Welcome to the Founder to Leader podcast, where we unpack the human and relational dilemmas founders face when leading scaling organizations. I'm Yohanna. I'm your host and program manager for the leadership development program with the same name, Founder to Leader. And in each episode, I'm joined by a founder, a researcher, and a leadership coach, each bringing their own unique perspectives to the dilemma. So let's get started. In this episode, we're zooming in on leadership communication in moments of crisis and what happens internally when blame, guilt, and responsibility land on you as a leader. More specifically, we'll unpack dilemmas related to the fear of ending up in a media shitstorm, being held accountable upwards for a costly mistake that you didn't personally make, and how to lead after firing a well-liked employee when you can't share the reasons with the rest of the team. And to help me unpack these dilemmas, I'm joined by founder Ankerstjerne, researcher Camilla Sløk, and leadership coach Magnus Stawicki, Blak.
Nice to be here.
So Ulf, you are the CEO and the co-founder of Kebab, which is a kebab chain with 7 locations that the Danish newspaper Berlingske has named the best kebab in Copenhagen.
Indeed, we're very proud of that.
And you have first-hand experiences with crisis communication after Kebab was recently criticized in the media. So I'm curious, as a founder and as a leader, what was the hardest part in deciding how to respond to that?
Well, I guess when you're a founder and somebody attacks your baby like that, it actually kind of elicits a very strong emotional reaction. Like you really feel like you're under attack, and you, especially in this case, I felt like it was very unfair. But what I realized was that I wanted to respond in a way where I kind of let that emotional reaction define my reaction in the public space. And I realized that was probably a bad way to go. So I realized I had to think back, and now I'm going to advertise a little bit for your course about this concept of roles. And in this particular situation, I wouldn't be responding as Ulf, the private person. I would be responding as Ulf, the CEO or leader of Kebab and kind of the face of the brand. So I needed to think that into how I wanted to approach it. So not just go for the jugular, but just kind of make it in a way where I thought I was representing my company in the way I should be representing.
Got it. Thank you for that. And I'm sure we'll get back to some of those points later as well in the dilemmas. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And Camilla, you are an associate professor at Copenhagen Business School, and one of your research areas is crisis communications and how leaders respond to accusation of guilt and blame. So based on your research, what do you think founders tend to misunderstand about crisis communications in their own companies?
I think Ulf just nailed it, that when you invent something, it's very much yourself. You're using yourself as the authentic person you are. And we hear a lot about authenticity also in leadership. But sometimes authenticity is a hindrance for actually executing professional management, as you just said, Ulf. Because it is obviously very difficult for any founder. I was married to a founder for many years, to differ between the product and oneself. So, but yeah, I have actually written a lot about this difference between private, personal, and professional, and also pointed out that you need to somehow, in general, but also in your communication, differ between these 3 layers. So, yeah.
Got it. Thank you for that and welcome. And I'm also super excited to learn more about your research throughout this episode as well. And Magnus, you are a leadership coach at Founder to Leader, where you combine a background in psychology and organizational development with 20 years of experience being a founder yourself. And in your coaching work, what tension do you see many founders get stuck in when they have to communicate in crisis?
Yeah, and Ulf, I'm just very happy that you mentioned the program and actually the fact that you mentioned the concept of the role and staying in the role also when things get tough. I think that's exactly what you also resonated and did in this situation. And people tend to listen a lot to CEOs and to founders when they speak. They're interesting people because of their role. So staying in that role and speaking through that role, also when things get heated, I think is a very good piece of advice. And I think it's also possible to prepare for this and to make small exercises with yourself so that if and when you end up in a situation like this, you know how you tend to react and maybe have that moment where you decide how you want to react and not just, how it comes out automatically. So yeah, very good to practice that.
Got it. Thank you for that. And thank you all of you for being here. I'm thinking that we're going to get started with the first dilemma right away. And before I read that out loud, I just want to make a quick disclaimer that all the names in the dilemmas are made up. So our first dilemma is from Youssef, who fears ending up in a media shitstorms. And he writes, my co-founders and I have ended up in a situation where we may have promised something externally that we can't fully live up to. It wasn't intentional, but now journalists have started poking around, and I'm terrified of ending up in a media shitstorm like I've seen happen to other founders. Part of me wants to be transparent and explain what happened, but I'm scared that saying anything at all will make things worse or make us look guilty. At the same time, I don't feel like we've done something fundamentally wrong, but I also don't want to look like we're hiding something. What should I do? So when you hear this dilemma, what comes up for you from your own experience?
Well, I can definitely relate to that kind of sense of anxiety that he has about it. Because I think all founders, and especially founders maybe in my business, know the power of the media. You mentioned this Berlingske review we got a few years back, which was a huge positive factor for us, right? So you also realize how much power they actually have. And the same situation, you also know that if you were to get the negative attention, that would be equally bad, right? So I completely understand how he's feeling in this situation. Of course, I had similar sentiments when it happened to us, or something similar happened to us back in December. I think what kind of changed it for me was that I realized that now we're getting this media attention, and we're being brought up to the stage, into the limelight, and we don't really have any, like, it's going to happen no matter what, right? It's happened now. So I should actually try and see it as an opportunity instead. This is an opportunity for me to go in and try and, I guess you could call it, like, define the narrative around us. So how I respond to this situation, in my case, it was a direct attack. Here, it might be like, it seems they have promised more than they could keep somehow. But how he then handles it from here, I guess, is his opportunity to show potential customers, potential collaborators, even his own staff, what it is he stands for and what his company should stand for. So I would suggest that he tries to take a step back from the situation and try and be a little bit less worried about what might be the outcome, and try and see how he can himself kind of not manipulate, that's the wrong word to use, but how he can affect it positively. So in this case, I would just, like I did myself, just hit it straight on and try to deal with it straight on.
I see Camilla taking a lot of notes. I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, because in my research, I've often found that leaders find themselves very innocent. Obviously, Ulf was, of course, innocent, but other founders, that things they do is, and when people criticize them, they in general perceive it as unfair. So what I train in my classes at CBS is matter of perspective related to guilt. As also they say, we're afraid of looking guilty. So how does this look in the perspective of not reacting in due time, which is actually often something that happens, maybe particularly in my field, which is public service. They don't react; they're passive. So that's the first kind of guilt you can fall, prey to or be guilty of not doing anything. The second one is you do something, but other people think that you're doing the wrong thing, which is obviously also unfair to the leader. And the third one is that you become a scapegoat for something else, some other circumstances, maybe a public debate around something that you didn't ever consider yourself as a part of. So these three perspectives related to guilt and responsibilities, maybe a first way to analyze the situation, to sort of look at how do I view it? How would other view it? And then take seriously that other might think that you are actually guilty of something, and then address that. It's difficult when you don't see you have a problem when another sees that you have, but you have to acknowledge, okay, this may be a problem, and now I address that, if anything, because another strategy is to do nothing. And if we look at all the scandals, and I've done that for so many years, a lot of them vanish very soon.
I'm a little bit curious to know also from your research, Camilla, about, one thing is ending up in these situations. Another thing is to prepare for it. And also you, Ulf, did you have any, readiness or preparedness for these types of situations? Have you thought about, that this can happen once you go from having one shop to 6 or 7 shops? Then suddenly, the publicity is on you, and you can expect that, there will be something to be interested in, positive and negative. So the question is, did you anticipate anything or do anything?
I guess this entire, without going into specifics of what our situation was about, the critique that was raised against us, I was fully aware that would happen sooner or later. Okay. Maybe not the particular perspective that was raised, but the one that was reckoned the second time around, because there was two particular situations there. But I've always felt that, also due to my own academic background, that I was perfectly capable of having those conversations. But what actually happened, and that really refers back to what I said in the beginning, was that how I responded to it turned out to be very different than what I thought I would do, because I thought I would go into the academic discussion of it. And instead, I had a completely different line where I basically just denied to acknowledge the basis of the discussion, and then just move on from there. So, to return to your question, I think that when it actually hits, I was not really prepared for the way I would handle it, and that just kind of came to me. But what was very valuable to me was that I was not being reactionary. And I was taking my time with actually coming up with how I wanted to respond to it. And I was in a situation where that was possible, which I don't know if that's the case in this situation.
You said that you didn't feel prepared for it. Was it something in the situation that surprised you a lot?
Well, it surprised me that it came the way it did. It was the day of the election. And I didn't see really where it came from. But of course, as you also said, Magnus, when you get to a certain level of success or size, you're no longer just me and my co-founder doing kebabs in a side shop on Vesterbro. You kind of become a symbol to other people that they can project their opinions about what you're doing onto. And whether that is how you perceive it or not doesn't really change the fact that that is how they see it, right? So, yeah.
And that's a typical problem or challenge or gift in the transition from founding a company and then becoming, as you say, a public target. And that's also why we often find that people that found their own company, they leave the managing of it and the public relations and all that to other people because they're not really interested in that. But I don't know if you're that big yet. But just to say, Ulf, it's common to have these. It's the change from spending 25 hours a day on a product to sort of making a step back and looking at it from outside. That's very difficult.
Yeah, I think also maybe from a psychological perspective, then being used to dealing with conflicts and crisis and actually dealing with it and not avoiding it, I think that can help in a situation like that. And I think in the Founder to Leader program, we work a lot with founders on avoidance and on avoiding conflicts in general. So if you are more used to it and actually leaning into conflicts in the sense that they're not going to go away if you don't do anything about them. They will be most often become easier to deal with if you actually deal with them. So if you have this sort of ongoing training and awareness to lean in and to deal with problems when they arise, then I think in a situation like this, it will be less uncommon to deal also with a major crisis because you have some training, some experience. You know how you'll feel and react when things get tough. So that might be also, I don't know actually, Camilla, if that's something that you...
Yes, that resonates.
Yeah.
But the problem for everybody, but particularly for founders, is time. To find the time to work your mind around it. Usually, founders are intelligent people, but still, it takes time to sort of rethink the whole situation. This from inside to outside. So I'm glad we have this program, founders to leader, because that's what you want to train. But for the rest, I just want to express my sympathy and empathy with the challenges of making this transition from inside to outside, looking at myself in the perspective of others.
But I also think, as from the founder perspective, that it gives you an extra card on your hand, in the sense that it's easier to get compassion for your particular situation when you actually show other people that, hey, I'm a person as well, right? This is actually, when you're attacking my company, you're attacking me and what I spend my life building.
Yeah.
And also your point before, Ulf, that using it for something constructive, using the situation to communicate something, your values or your mission. That's a great way to look at it, but it also takes, either something personally that you have inside of you, or training that you know that you can do this when things appear. So I think it's a very it's a very big inspiration that you actually stopped and said, hey, maybe we can actually use this for something positive, even though it started as a sort of a critical situation. I think I followed the case, in the media, and I think I wanted to go and eat a kebab after that. I don't know how your numbers are.
No, but that was thankfully the situation. Was that it actually? We said, we've been telling each other, this was not really a shitstorm anymore. It's a love storm.
Yeah,
because we got so much positive attention around it, and people were really positive towards it. What was interesting, though, in that situation was that then a second critical debate, was published in the newspaper. And then by then I actually decided not to engage, because we kind of took a think about it, and we talked to some people who also understood communications better than us.
Sure.
And they were also like, hey, but maybe it's going to be funny for you to do it, because I'm not going to lie, I did enjoy writing that piece. But that there was nothing really more to be gained. So by then we just kind of let it ebb out. We had said what we wanted to do. We had shown which kind of company we are and what we're trying to be and where we're coming from. And we had tried to hit the people we wanted to hear our side of the story. And then we were like, yeah, okay, good, fine.
We also, again, I would like to advocate for the importance of looking at what are you trying to defend from outside, because not everything can be defended. It's just, you can hit it right on if you have something that you think is very important and ethically true. But if it's somehow ethically in the gray area, if you have people who are accusing you directly for something that is very wrong, just shut up. But that is it's always difficult for oneself to understand when to shut up and when to speak.
Absolutely. And of course it is a little difficult because we only have very limited information and we don't know what this particular case is. One thing that I want to go back to a bit, if someone is listening and learning about crisis communication for the first time, and what does it actually mean, that it needs to feel like a person behind and not like a corporation? Magnus, you talked a bit about before, like values and mission, etc. Is there anything particular that you did, Ulf, to kind of embrace that, or is it anything that you've seen in your research work to kind of make it more personal?
But it's not something you can pull. I mean, if people really feel something, it's the same with apologies, Yohanna. If somebody says, "Okay, I'm sorry," you think, "I don't believe you." So you simply have to be true to your statement. I don't think you can pretend. That's what I want to say.
No, I also think I don't really think, and that's not to toot my own horn, but I think it would have been very hard for other people to write what I did, in the sense that you need to have that investment of your personal in order to kind of take that position. And we were in a very, I guess, lucky position in the sense that this was not because we had served some bad meat that got somebody infected and sick. It was not a situation like that, which I would imagine this might be more similar to. So I don't want to be the person sitting here saying, use every scandal as a promotional effort, right? That's not really what I'm saying. So definitely it depends on the situation.
All right. So if I am to summarize some of the takeaways from Yusuf here, what I'm hearing is, first of all, don't just react, but actually take the time to react. And with that, be very reflective and think about how others might view this. So be actually self-aware and self-critical in that. Of course, we only have very limited information now, but if it is possible, reframe it as an opportunity and a way to kind of control the narrative and into something positive. And with that, see if you can find a more personal angle and not just a big corporation angle. For example, talking about the values and the mission and so. Anything you would like to add?
Yeah, prepare for it. Train. You're out there in the world, so people see you and notice you. So you could expect that you will get some reaction. So you might as well prepare. Preparing is not cheating.
That is very true. A quick note, this podcast is brought to you by Founder to Leader, Denmark's most established leadership development program for founders with personnel responsibility. The program combines organizational psychology with experiential learning and is delivered by Copenhagen Business School and the Danish Industry Foundation. It's free to participate, so read more and apply at foundertoleader.dk. And with that, let's move on to our second dilemma. And that is from Sonia, who has to explain a very costly mistake that she didn't personally make to her board and investors. And she writes, one of my senior leaders recently made a decision that turned into a very expensive mistake for the company. And soon I need to explain what happened to our board and investors. On the one hand, it feels really unfair that I have to take full responsibility for something I didn't do. On the other hand, I'm struggling with the idea of pointing the finger at someone on my team, especially someone that up until this point has been instrumental in our growth. I'm worried that if I don't handle this right, it will seriously damage my credibility with people that I need in my corner. So how do I best handle this situation? So Camilla, how would you make sense of this dilemma through your research lens?
Well, this is a typical catch-22, isn't it? Either way, you will have a problem. As it is described, Sonia will have a problem with her other employees, the co-workers she's having, if she sort of throws the senior leader under the bus. But if she doesn't say anything to the board, they will think she's incompetent. So either way, she'll have problems. One solution, if we start brainstorming, could be to talk to the senior leader and maybe make an agreement with him that she actually presents part of the truth, or the whole truth or nothing but the truth, to the board. So that the senior leaders understand that this is necessary in order to have the continuing support and credibility from the board. That could be one solution.
One thing that struck me in this was it also seems like it's definitely taken like the emotional toll that she's going through by having to deal with it, right? Because he says it feels really unfair. And was just caught thinking but I think that particular mindset might be a bigger hindrance for her dealing with this problem than anything else. And just to return to the idea about the roles here, it's like whether or not it's fair for you to have to do this is really irrelevant. What is relevant is whether or not you, as the supreme leader, which has a problem, not supreme leader, that sounds pretty bad, in this situation, whether or not you take responsibility for what happened on your watch. So in that sense, I think I would suggest to her that to make it easier for her to digest, try and think about it like that you are just doing your part as the part you're playing within your company. Rather than you're throwing somebody under the bus, you are actually trying to protect your company.
Yeah, I think you can't go through having a startup without ending up in various crises. I mean, all the founders that we've worked with the past 2.5 years, I think it's 200 founders now. I don't think any of them came in with not having problems or challenges or crises. And it's more common to have it very often than very seldomly. So, I mean, you can't make an omelet and not break an egg or whatever the saying is. So also own it, stand up for it, explain it as honestly as you can and put forward the data and deal with it. I mean, it's part of your role as a founder to deal with all sorts of, and you're nodding. I mean, day in, day out, you know, there's problems. So, you know, that's a big part of what makes you a success. That is to be able to deal with various types of problems and challenges all the time.
And it will feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then thinking about whether or not it's fair for you just makes it, at least from my perspective, harder for me. Like, I just need to accept that this is how it is and then move on with it.
Stay with the uncomfortable a little bit and just, let it be there, and then, find out what you can do. And, deal with it, move on, lean into it. It's not going to go away if you don't touch it. So touch it and get it over with. Yeah.
But maybe with this very important topic, we could also from the experiences at the Founder to Leader, touch upon the problem of two founders who disagree, for instance, in the case of Sonja. So how do you advise if the one says, let's throw Egon under the bus, and the other one says, no, we can't? So how do you help founders in these cases?
I think again, speaking through, what is what's the purpose of the company? What's the main task? What are the roles here? How can they deal with it professionally, internally and externally? I think you're also mentioning the fact that see yourself from the outside also, and how would the world perceive you? And what's a good enough response in this situation? And you can also communicate something to the outside world, and then do a little bit different on in the inside, because you need to steer the crisis if it's big, but you also need to be honest in this particular situation when it's investors, and so it's actually the owners. So, I mean, you cannot. There's a limit to what you want to hide for the owners, right? If you have a good enough relationship, collaboration with them, probably there can also be a resource in solving this and coming up with good ideas.
But you're avoiding the problem.
What
if the co-founders disagree, Magnus?
You deal with it. Talk about it. I've in my experience, co-founders disagree all the time. Yes. So that's actually what we are training
exactly,
and putting a lot of awareness to. That is, not to avoid these conflicts, but to lean into them and raise them and talk to each other, see where your opinions differ, and the worst thing you can do, in my opinion, is to just pretend that you don't disagree, and that you and then the gap will just be bigger and bigger. If you're used to dealing with that gap and addressing it, I think it becomes easier also in a crisis situation.
I would imagine that this feeling of having to be accountable for your mistakes that you didn't make, it's very connected to the leadership role, right?
Sure.
So I'm also super curious to hear your experience there, Magnus. If you had Sonja in your coaching room, what would be things that you would be curious about?
Yeah, I mean, as a leader, you are responsible. You have the ultimate responsibility. So, I mean, if you cannot bear to also be a leader when things get rough, then there's something to work on, I think. And of course, she's it's a senior leader in her team or whatever in her startup, so she has to talk with her as well, that senior leader, and help her to deal with the situation, because she's still the leader of that person as well. So she has a dual role, at least, to both manage the company's interest and also to help that particular leader navigate that very critical situation.
And also curious there to hear your experience there, Ulf. Have you ever experienced situations where you were expected to take responsibility for mistakes that you didn't do? And how was that for you?
Well, I guess in the restaurant industry, it happens all the time, but at a lot smaller level. But at this kind of situation, no. But I've definitely had experience with having responsibilities for decisions that were out of my control, and it is not nice, and it is not great. But again, as I think we agree on, it's very much like. But then that is kind of part of the game that we're playing, or so kind of having this idea of like whether I feel it's unfair or not is not really helping me get to the bottom of the problem and solving it. So I'd also say in this situation, I think it's very commendable that she wants to protect the senior leader, right? And I think maybe that's also one way you could do it, is just to take the complete responsibility for it, and then just say to your board that this happened on my watch, and I have complete trust in my team, and this will never happen again. And if she is, as I'm sure she is, she has a good relationship with her board, and she's she's trustworthy and she's competent, I'm sure that's also going to happen.
Or if it happens again, we'll deal with it again. Because things happen all the time when you run a startup, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's also what I'm sitting with this dilemma, that taking responsibility doesn't necessarily mean taking the blame for the decision, right? It's also about showing that you have the situation under control, you're learning things from it, and you're ensuring to putting in structure, guidelines, whatever it is, to ensure that it doesn't happen again. I mean, that's also a way to take responsibility without taking the blame.
I mean, we mentioned in the beginning of this podcast of, the strength of recognizing and knowing your own role as a CEO or a founder. And I think, again, in this dilemma, I think that could be also a good way to speak through your role and know that when you are a CEO or a founder, they will listen to you because you're interesting and you're an important figure or persona. You have something on your mind, and people will naturally listen to you. And so use that and stay as much as possible in that role, and don't shy away from whatever problems arise, because they will come all the time. Do it and don't be afraid.
Yeah. And I would love a little crash course in what it means. We got one from Camilla before, but I would also love one from you from the leadership coach perspective, because this speaking and staying in role is something that we work with a lot in founded leaders. So, but it might be someone listening that's hearing it for the first time. So what is actually that mental model, and what does it mean to speak and stay in role?
Yeah, it's actually something that can be trained. It's something about knowing yourself as well. What do you react to? What situations do you react to? What does it activate when you get into in this situation, a conflict or something that is really difficult? So one thing is actually to work with yourself and on yourself, to know yourself and to mature yourself. And then the small things that you can train in your daily life as a founder is actually to recognize when you get paralyzed or when you avoid conflicts. We call it mindful avoidance. It's something where you notice something, but you actually decide or unconsciously to not go in and try to solve it, but stay away. So this can be trained, but sometimes it takes someone else to notice it. So, being in a program like Founder to Leader or working with a coach can be a very good way to also find out where your gaps are, or where you need to train that awareness. Oftentimes, it's much easier to do with someone else, to mirror yourself.
All right. Then to answer Sonia's question, how do I best handle this situation? So what I'm hearing then is that this is part of your role. So practice speaking and staying in that role, and think about what is actually best for your company. And then there's also something there around that taking responsibility is not necessarily the same as taking the blame. And it might be that with the board and the investor, one thing that creates credibility is not kind of necessarily taking on that blame, but is then showing that you have kind of the data and you use that data as well to kind of plan ahead and making sure that that's not happening again. Great. Then we are moving on to our third and our last dilemma. And that is from Patrick. And it's about how you lead after firing a well-liked employee when you can't share the reasons with the rest of the team. So Patrick writes, I recently had to fire a very well-liked employee because they breached their contract. So from a legal and company perspective, there was no other option. My problem is that because I can't share what actually happened to the rest of the team, people are confused, upset, and angry at me. I know it was the right call, but I hate being the one that everyone is angry at when I can't tell the full story. Any advice on what to say or do to make this better? So Magnus, if Patrick was sitting in your coaching room, what do you think? What would be the most important to explore and or understand first, kind of before thinking about what to say or what to do to the team?
Yeah, I think it's super uncomfortable for many people not to be liked or loved all the time, and in a situation like this, it's not a very lovable situation to fire someone, and especially not if it's a very well liked and important employee. In this situation, I think I would work with Patrick on actually coping, dealing with that feeling of also having to do something unnice once in a while. For the sake of the employees, it's a very common situation in sort of in change management also, that the top management, they know what is going to go down much before the employees. So having that sort of information and sharing only what you can share, I think it's a tough situation. I mean, people react very differently to that. If it's the first time, and also if it's the first time you have to fire someone, it can feel terrible. Yeah.
Horrible.
And you have to go through that as a founder to fire the first employee. It will get easier, but it does. I think it's very seldom that people don't get affected by firing people, and also by not being able to share openly everything. I think many people want to do that. I think it's quite natural. But again, it's part of the deal. If you want to be a leader, and this is not only isolated to being a startup founder, but that's also part of being a leader, that you have to be able to contain those thoughts and feelings.
I think that's one of the beautiful things about, just to make another advertisement for Founder, is that you meet people who are in the same situation as you, because it is often cold on the top, right? And it's like those issues that you have with, for instance, when you're firing somebody who's doing their best or is a lovely person, but whatever, like you are making a major negative influence on their life, and it feels absolutely horrible. So to talk to other people who've been in the same situation is very good for you on a personal level. So I'd also say, like, for this person, Patrick, like him reaching out to us in this case, I think is very valuable. So you understand that you're not the only person standing with this problem.
I also think it's that particularly startups have the problem of a family culture, which is very common, because you're all in it because you are very excited about the project. So when you reach the next level, that is that not all in the family are welcome anymore. It also feels like a really deep betrayal, not only of the person who thought that he or she was lovely and contributing, but also to the rest of the family, who may think that you are a bit of a psychopath. I always wonder why there are so many quizzes on the internet about, is your boss a psychopath? It's probably because we don't have a very nuanced understanding of the responsibility of a leader. So we only had that very stupid concept. But it is difficult. The family culture gives a lot of benefits, but also these disadvantages. So you can be viewed like a hypocrite when you all of a sudden, yes, as mentioned, sack people. And I think the problem here is that the colleagues, the reaction from those, I would be more afraid of that than maybe the particular person in question.
But it's nice that you mentioned, having sort of a family culture, and many of the founders in this program, they don't only have a family culture, they also have family in the startup, and or close friends or study friends, friends from study, and I think that complicates the situation even more. So firing someone who is strictly an employee is one thing, but firing someone who's your friend from childhood, that's a different ball game, or your cousin, or your sibling, or mother. Sure. We've had.
I know these startup cultures so close from
and
my
many of the founders that we have in the program, they started by hiring like close friends, and then they get to the situation where they have to fire the first one. And then they find out, okay, this is not a very good way to continue this company. Maybe it's better to hire someone where it's about what they do, and not that I know them in another setting.
There's also one more topic we need to mention in the context of startups, and that's law and arbejdsret. All the rights that people have. Employees sometimes, I mean, Danes know there are a lot of laws. They may not know always the particularities of I don't know the English word arbejdsret. Arbejdsret covers the rights, the legal rights of the employee. So the employee in this case has the right to be protected from being talked about. And if the founder here, Patrick, does not respect that, he can end in court. So there's also a matter of simply taking these rules to heart and simply say that's a part of the game. I cannot talk about why I was going to sack this person. That's part of the game.
I also think like in this particular situation, let's say it's a startup with like 10 people, right? Maybe what you do is you actually communicate to your team and tell them, I need you guys to have faith in me in this situation. I really want to explain to you what happened, but I am not able to do so. And I need you guys to understand that I am just trying to do what is best for the company. And I would never, it hurts me as well as it hurts you, but we're just in a situation where I've had to do something and you need to trust in my ability to lead the company.
Yeah.
And then hopefully Patrick will have enough integrity already that they will respect that and they will understand that he is actually just doing his job.
Yeah, absolutely. Because of course there's a lot of space between I can't say anything and I'll tell you every single detail.
Yes.
Yeah. So being curious that what you can explore there.
Yeah. The Danish word here is tavshedspligt, and that's the duty to remain silent as a leader. It's also very difficult for public managers, which I'm teaching mostly. It's very difficult. It's completely recognizable, the situation from so many workplaces that you, for some reason, which sometimes people do things you would never imagine anybody would do, and you simply have to show them the door and to leave in 15 minutes. And the rest of the crowd will be like, what happened? And you just can't tell because of this, the duty to remain silent about what was the real truth.
And that is very hard on a human level, right? Because we all, as you guys said, we want to be loved, we want to be liked, but we definitely also want to be understood, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And that's like a prime mover. So if you cannot I understand how that would be a horribly frustrating situation to be in, especially if you already are a person who has this, as it seems with Patrick, this strong need to be liked.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's easier for some people, some founders to have those, like having staff that dislike them than others. I can relate to that from my own experience. So, yeah.
I think it's an important point, Ulf. You want other people to understand that you are a fair and just and right person. You're doing things for the right reasons, but sometimes you just can't.
So you can't tell them the reasons, but you can tell them that you had some.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And just maybe making that crystal clear to people. And maybe even sit them all down and look them in the eye and say, like, I know you all like this person, and I'm really sad that we had to do this, but it was simply what we had to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I work closely with founders, and if they haven't yet, fired a person, I actually talk with them about, what are you going to do the day that you have to fire someone? How are you going to get prepared for that? So there's also something about anticipating these scenarios that, as a founder, you will get to a point where, you'll lose a customer, you'll get in the media, you'll have to fire someone. And if you are totally unprepared for these things, then you will have to find out what you want to do in the moment. But it is actually possible to prepare yourself for this, both practically, maybe having a communication plan ready at hand that you can use when it happens, but also mentally, emotionally, what does this situation look like? Something you have tried before? What makes you uncomfortable? How do you react when crisis hit you? So being proactive and anticipating that, in the life of the startup founder, you will be presented with all sorts of things that are difficult, but preparing is an option, and especially when it comes down to firing someone, that's going to happen sooner or later. So you might as well do a little bit of preparation for that.
And I think the concept of role in that situation is very good for you as a mental, what shall we call it, building block. That you're like, obviously there's always a personal aspect of you sitting there firing somebody. You had a personal relationship with that person, but you're also just playing the role of caretaker of the company. So as long as you kind of are loyal to that, at least for me, then those kind of decisions and those kind of discussions become easier to do. That if I didn't think that into it, because then I would still be kind of caught up in my own emotions around the situation. So to try and put those away and just feel like, what should I do in this situation as the caretaker of my company, makes it easier for me, at least.
I'm getting curious of what we talked a bit about before this, if this is a need, that Patrick has like a need to be liked, or if it's more about like what should you, like how much should you carry as a leader? Because it sounds to me when reading this dilemma that Patrick is kind of absorbing all of this anger and collective frustration that comes from the employees. So I'm curious also with this kind of absorbing collective frustration, Camilla, is that something that that your research look at?
But there are different views on what does it mean to take on leadership, and in the view I have, you are simply always aparted, and you're always in another room than the rest of the group. That's part of the role. You can call it you're up or you're down or you're whatever, but you're not in the same room, and it's a power asymmetry. So for me, it's just simply, as we mentioned many times, it's necessary to take on the shame and the guilt and the blame as part of the role. But not everybody would agree to that, but that's my view on leadership.
Yeah. If someone then needs, Magnus, like to learn how to deal with that shame or guilt, if Patrick would, for example, be someone that you would be coaching, how are ways to work with that, kind of in addition to what we talked about already with the role and thinking about kind of how do I best serve my company? Are there other things there that Patrick can learn from?
Yeah, I think, visiting again sort of the hidden patterns of the person's history, what's their upbringing, what do they carry with them, what sort of experience do they have with authority figures in their early life? How did they react to things when they were growing up? So digging a little bit deep is a very good thing when you're a leader, because then you get to know the deeper layers of yourself. And then when something difficult appears, then you know what to expect, and you can deal better with these issues. Desire to be loved is something that can be worked on, more directly, because in your leadership role, your job is not to be loved. Your job is to lead the company forward, to beat the competitors, to make an awesome product, to sell it. So if you are loved doing that, great. If not, okay, it's not really what you signed up for. Then you might want to consider to either work on that issue or to find a job where that's a bigger part of your job. Because you cannot drive a startup forward without pushing somebody or some competitors away, or dealing with some very tough situations. So being loved all the time is simply not an option. So I think just realizing that as well, that it's not a part of the job description to be loved all the time, that can be helpful to know and to think about that as well. Yeah, you can still run a successful business and make tough decisions and still behave in a good way and be a good person to your employees.
So to summarize then, the advice to Patrick is that even if you legally can't say what the reason for the firing is, then think about what you actually can say, because there might still be room to acknowledge the process, kind of the values behind the decision, and also acknowledging the impact that you see it having on the team as well. And then we're coming back to staying and talking from the role, and actually realizing that as a founder and as a leader, you are not part of the group. And as a leader, you will not be loved all the time. And also in this particular dilemma, that it is understandable that the employees have strong reactions, and it's also very understandable that you, Patrick, have strong reaction to it as well. It's uncomfortable, and that's okay. And I'm also hearing the importance of finding a network or another founder leader who gets this as well, and have that outlet to talk about these very difficult and complex emotions of running a company and leading a company. Thank you so much. Ulf and Camilla and Magnus for taking the time to be here.
It was good.
Thank you.
It was a good talk.
Yeah.
And to everyone listening, thank you so much for tuning in to the Founded Leader podcast. I'll speak to you next time. And if you like what you heard today, please remember to subscribe, review, and share. Thank you.